And the point there on the right, the second one from the top, delivers precise results within the parameters of its developmental stage, because machine translation is very much a work in progress. It's progressing, you know, mightily, but it's still in progress. So from our client's point of view, you know, many institutions that they work for may view English translation as some kind of, you know, optional extra, yeah, something to be added on later, and they may not even, you know, allocate a budget for it. There might be no money for it, or they may not really understand the importance of specialist translation services and specialist editing services, and that leaves, you know, researchers in a difficult position. And some researchers in this position may, shall we say, misunderstand machine translation or free online translation services. They may misunderstand these as some kind of a solution to their problem, because, you know, they're for their speed, for their low cost, indeed zero cost in many cases. But with machine translation, unfortunately the quality of the output is almost always too low to, you know, in academic terms, it's too low to satisfy you know, a general review panel. Reviewers are going to look at it and reject it immediately, and indeed most machine translated work will not even reach the review stage. It will be rejected before that. You know, editors don't want to annoy or vex their reviewers who work unpaid for this. However, as machine translation becomes more and more sophisticated, machine translation post-editing, MTPE, has become an increasingly viable option. And MTPE basically, you know, is you get a machine translated template, and on top of that you layer a bilingual language checker, and then on top of that you may layer you know, whatever specialist editing services you wish or are available. And excuse me. So this MTPE approach, it offers much of the speed and the cost effectiveness of pure machine translation, but, you know, the quality is better. You have machine translation, but with enhanced quality. However, of course, the thing is that a machine translated template, once it's in your hands, it presents bilingual checkers, and it presents later editors with all the same issues, all the same problems that we've discussed above. You know, of terminology, of consistency, of subject matter expertise. None of these things disappear just because you've put your text through a machine translation. And indeed, machine translation also presents the same issues that you find with human translations in terms of language pairs. So you're working from this language into that language. There will be characteristic issues and problems arising from machine translation in a kind of similar way to human translation, actually. You know, machine translation quite generally gives us issues of clarity, subject matter expertise, consistency, loss of nuance, all of these things. So it's certainly not a magic bullet. And you know, in terms of academic translation, we're a long way away from machine translation ever challenging human translation entirely. Okay, and so it's not a magic bullet at all. Okay, now let me return you to Uttkarsha. Thanks very much. And the next slide, thanks.
So thank you so much, John, for this enlightening part of the session. So in recent years, researchers have witnessed dramatic changes in the science communications landscape. And since English is predominantly used as a knowledge dissemination language by high impact academic journals, researchers from ESL regions, though add to the knowledge, but fail at adding to the literature. Hence, translation comes to their resort for sharing knowledge, information, and ideas across the world, as publishing in non-English journals will restrict researchers from imprinting their identity on the global map. Moreover, publishing in languages other than English hampers the academic bibliodiversity. Furthermore, several peer-reviewed non-English scholarly journals are excluded from prestigious journal indexes. Translating academic literature goes above and beyond publication barriers and bridges cultural gaps amongst different regions and helps in preserving literature for advancing research in the future. As we speak of academic translations, it can be broadly classified into 4 types. First, being the literary, second, being professional, third, being technical, and fourth, being administrative. The literary type of translation deals with translations of poems, plays, etc. It involves comprehensive and clear translation of the context, sound, and expressions of the source text. Next is professional translations, which includes translation of medical or legal documents and requires the translator to have subject matter expertise. Then is the technical translations, which includes translation of engineering documents, instruction manuals, etc. Along with subject expertise and technical knowledge, the translator must also be careful with the numeric data in terms of translating technical documents. Lastly, the administrative translations are also termed as the subtype of professional translations, which includes translation of management texts and documents. As we speak of the important role that translation plays in academia, we must understand the challenges faced during the process. There are 8 most common challenges in academic translations, as you all must be aware of. First, being the failure of understanding the context, translating cultural specific expressions, lexical-semantic problems, formal standard language, translating idioms, rhetorical questions, sarcasms, etc., compound word translations, incorrect usage of keywords, and the most important one is grammar and punctuation errors. The first challenge that we talk about today is faced by translation, which is not being able to comprehend the source text. This is the primary need to be able to translate any document. If you cannot understand what's written in the source text, you'll not be able to translate it to the target language. Hence, comprehension of the source text and understanding it to the T is very important. Other challenge arises while translating culture-specific expressions, as cultural diversity is often reflected in writings by ESL authors. Next challenge in academic translations is lexical-semantic problems. This is when there's difficulty in understanding instructions or conversations with words that may have 2 different meanings, such as homophones. Then comes the challenge of translating source text to English as the target language, whilst maintaining the target language's standard linguistic rules. Coming to the other 4 set of challenges faced in academic translations, another challenge is of translating region-specific idioms, expressions, sarcastic statements, or rhetorical questions from source text to English. Such expressions must be translated carefully without changing their intent or meaning. Following this is the translation challenge of translating compound words. For example, the word fireman is made up of two words, fire and man, which have different meanings individually and have a completely different meaning as a compound word. Another major challenge while translating is usage of incorrect keywords. As we know, the keywords volume may differ in each region. Therefore, word-for-word translation may not deliver exact keywords intensity or volume to efficiently work on the global platform. Finally, another crucial aspect is the difficulty in abiding by grammar and punctuation rules of the English language whilst conveying contextual meaning of the original language. So, as now we've acknowledged the challenges faced in academic translations, we must know how to avoid them to create error-free translated documents and manuscripts. Here, I shall be discussing a few tips and tricks to use in order to overcome these challenges. Okay, coming to the first challenge is the accurate comprehension of source text. To deal with the challenge of failing to understand the source text, a translator must firstly gain proficiency in the source text language. Furthermore, they must ensure factual correctness of the source text by referring the bibliography to avoid misinterpretation and consequently avoid mistranslation. In addition, the translator must analyze the source text and alter it by adding, deleting, or rearranging words and ideas to effectively communicate in the English language. Lastly, clarify your doubts if you have any, and do not translate in mere case of assumption in terms of gray areas. To overcome the challenge of translating culture-specific expressions, a translator must firstly display a complete command over both the source and the target language in terms of phrasing the sentences clearly, understanding the syntax, that is, how words and morphemes, which are smaller sentences, combine to form larger units such as phrases and sentences, and the etymology, that is, the origin of certain words. Secondly, the translator must avoid word-for-word translations of region-specific ideas or expressions. And finally, they must use local terms to accurately adapt the translated text to targeted culture. Now, coming to the other problem is dealing with lexical-semantic problems. While dealing with lexical-semantic problems, a translator must begin with referring to dictionaries, glossaries, subject experts, etc., to get a clear understanding of used words. Furthermore, exact meaning of sentences must be decoded to avoid using words in wrong content. Use descriptive words wherever applicable. More importantly, build a semantic map between words so that there is an interconnection and you are aware of the interconnection between the words that are related to specific themes and concepts. Here comes the major challenge which is faced in academic translation is of maintaining the formal standards of the target language. The challenges faced here are related to translating in either British or English language, that is the American English language, and other issues such as capitalization, spacing, contractions, typographical errors, etc. While translating from source text to English language, a translator must also be careful whether the text is to be translated in British English or American English. For instance, as we can see on the slide today, the use of serial commas in the British sentence is not incorporated while it is in the American sentence in the statement absorbance spectra 1089, 1410, 1611, 2918, and 3226 centimeters inverse. However, in the American sentences, we see that there is an incorporation of a serial comma between the digit 2918 and the term and 3226 centimeters inverse. Likewise, there is another difference is between the spellings used by British English and the American English. In the example given on our slide, the typical thermal decomposition behavior and the one given in the American sentence style, the typical thermal decomposition behavior, we can see that the spelling of behavior, rather both correct, are different in both ways. Hence, we must understand that terms that are used in both the languages, in both the terms, are similar, yet not different from what the standards oblige. In addition, maintaining capitalization rules, for instance, laparoscopic versus open hepatectomy approach for regional hepatolithiasis. However, in the correct sentence, you would see that the term regional hepatolithiasis is not written in capital. Coming to the next problem is maintaining spacing issues. The first example that you may see is when the frequencies are mentioned, that is, the frequency of electric power is 50 by 60 Hertz. And in the correct sentence, you may see that there is a difference between the unit of frequency and the quantity that is given. Likewise, we need to understand that such spacing issues are also not carry forwarded. Another challenge is of maintaining contractions. As you can see in the incorrect sentence as we have given in the example here, however, the findings weren't consistent with previous findings. Here, we understand that in academic writing, it is always better to be as unambiguous as we can. Therefore, we write the correct sentence as, however, the findings were not consistent with previous findings. Going forward, I would also like to mention the typographical errors mentioned here. Typographical errors are not just common in translation, in translation, but also while writing or creating new content. Thus, as you can see on the screen, both the examples of incorrect and correct sentences, I would like to take up the second example, that is, the conidia resting in the alveoli begin to grow and geminate, where geminate does not make any sense. However, the correct formation is the conidia resting in the alveoli begin to grow and germinate. Going forward, another major challenge is deciphering regional idioms, sarcastic statements, expressions, or rhetorical questions which cannot be translated by the literal definitions of the words. Hence, a translator must find an equivalent idiom or expression in English language without hampering the meaning or intent of the source text. If this is not possible, as a result, a translator must write an idiom in the target language with different words or sentences, structure, and complete it with a short explanation. Speaking of translating compound words, ensure that the overall meaning of the compound word is retained and that it is translated to its literal meaning. Verbatim of such words is not acceptable while translating. As we see here on the screen, the word butterfly is neither a fly nor a butter, though is made of two different words, butter and a fly. Another challenge is of using globally relevant keywords. As we know, regional keywords may not be effective in English, and some terms used in regional languages may be missing in the target language. A translator must identify keywords for the manuscripts or documents based on their volume on the global platform. Here, the literal translations of keywords may not be as impactful as it may be for the specific region. Moving forward to one of the most important challenges faced by translators are following the grammar rules. The challenge of abiding by the grammar rules of the English language is very critical. Given the trickiness of it, English grammar rules must be maintained and followed scrupulously. Learn to adopt deductive method whilst not skipping any relevant and important information and convey the exact meaning of the source text. Furthermore, avoid exaggeration and emphasize on the accuracy. However, you would notice that in case of exaggerating, there is a chance of you kind of misquoting or misleading the reader. Your best resort would be to use one of the most reliable online grammar checker tools, which is Trinka AI. As we all have heard, a comma can kill a man. Another challenge is following punctuation rules carefully. It is a crucial aspect that needs sincere attention while translating. Some key points to remember while using some of these regularly used punctuation marks are: comma, use it to create a pause or to separate ideas or listed content in a sentence. Semicolon, use it to create a break between interconnected ideas. Colon, use it to connect two sentences thematically. Full stop, it is also called as a period, which is used to denote that the sentence has ended. And lastly is apostrophe, which is used to indicate ownership or missing letters or numbers. Finally, we speak of correct usage of transition words and phrases. To emphasize a contrast, use words such as however, nevertheless, although, even though, yet, despite, in spite of, in contrast, in comparison, while, whereas, on the other hand, on the contrary. To indicate cause for a reason, use words such as for, because, since, as. To compare data, use words such as similarly, likewise, similar to, both, and. And lastly, to indicate results or deliver inferences, use words such as a result, as a consequence of, therefore, thus, consequently, hence, owing to. So as we've understood the tricks and tips to overcome these common challenges in academic translation, my colleague and co-presenter John will take you through some relevant examples from original manuscript assignments.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much, Uttkarsha. Thanks indeed. Now we're going to take a look at some translations from various language pairs, well, from basically into English from various source languages. And I won't detain you too long with them. We'll just pick out, one or two from each. But please take a moment and just read through these edits of translations. And these edits are taking care mainly of translation issues only. We're not even looking at grammar, stuff like that in general. So this is from Japanese. Oh, sorry. Can we go back to the Japanese one a minute? Sorry. Thanks. Now this text, this translation has a couple of pretty critical issues, which I like to think of as reflexive errors that were edited, in the process. And I'm thinking there of, where you're sitting as a translator and you can see the text, but your brain tells you, your mind tells you something a bit different. And, you think your mind knows better, but it doesn't. I hope you can see this reasonably well. In line 2 in the first paragraph at the start, of July 2019 is actually at the end of July 2019 correctly, and it's a kind of reflexive error that you just jump to a conclusion, and that's why it's so important to go back and every paragraph look again, check again. These are constant hazards for human translators, this kind of reflexive thing. One more, just there on line 5 of paragraph 1, the Tokyo area should have been the Tokai area. It's another reflexive mistake, just jumping to a conclusion. I presume the translator lives in Tokyo and is just so used to seeing that character, and then it's east, it's Tokyo. So these are constant hazards, and they produce gross errors and serious problems that we can't do unless we, are very vigilant on ourselves. Okay, thanks so much. Next one, thank you. If you would, the Chinese example. Thank you. We'll just pick out one point here. The literature publishing language was limited to English. Is that down on? Where is it? Yeah, line 6 and 7. This is a phrase skip by the translator, corrected in the checking. This kind of skip again is a constant hazard for the human translator. We must be always vigilant about it. And again, these are issues before we even come to academic translation as such. Thanks. The next one, if you would, thank you. The Korean, yes. So there was quite a lot of discussion in this paper on the place name. This is a study set in a place called Goyang in Korea, which would be known in Korean as Goyangsi. And we would have the same thing in Japanese and in Chinese as well. And so we have an issue of what we call verity in-house. It would be like, almost like localization. What do we do with this? Apparently the official name of this place is Goyangsi, as per the Korean, but that's not really going to fly with a more general English readership. This isn't Korean studies as such, is it? So the translator amended this to City of Goyang, and yet, however, when we go online, when we go onto the city's website and so on, we see that in fact the preferred English phrasing, though not the official name, but the preferred English phrasing is Goyang City, not City of Goyang, and that's one of the kind of details that we can help our clients with in terms of credibility. Thank you. Yeah, we'll take the Spanish one last, will we? Thanks so much. So about heritage assets, heritage industry, and we're coming in from a language that's much closer to English, and yet we can see. Let me pick out one thing. Where is it? Second paragraph, end of the first line and second line. So the excuse me, the translator has chosen the phrase material and immaterial heritage. Looks fine, right? It looks fine to me until we realize that the normal way, the standard way that this concept is discussed in English academia is tangible and intangible heritage. It's a small difference, but it's a big difference in subject matter expertise and in the client's credibility and their membership of a language community that will afford them trust and credibility. So that was I think a quite crucial, looks small but quite a crucial edit in helping our client. Okay, thank you so much. We'll wrap up this part with some best practice pointers, quite pragmatic, as we discussed before in talking about client expectations. So when a job comes into you as a translator, that you clearly establish the academic discipline and field. There will be a subject allocation with email, for example, but with your own eyes, you're the best person to judge as well. Going down, establish your suitability for the assignment. Okay, this is ballpark for me. I know this subject area. I belong to this language community, but are there any red flags? Maybe I should give this to someone else with a bit more expertise in this particular part of this field that I belong to. So know your limits. It's good to do that and be cautious in accepting assignments. Going down, clearly establish the source target key terminology. You establish it in the original text, and you nail it down in the target text, English text, whatever. If you're working on a platform like MemSource, it'll help do it automatically. If you're working in Word, you can do it mechanically by find and replace. But it should be there very clearly in your mind and very consistently throughout the text. Then you can go and do the rest of the text and translate it around that. So ensure that the key terminology is consistently in place. Yeah, thanks. Check for omissions, etc. Rolling, reflexive errors, skips, clarity issues. All of this, is best done, I think, on a rolling basis, on a paragraph basis. When you reach the end of the assignment, your mind is just too tired, really, to go back and wade through it all again. So, just when you finish a paragraph, take a deep breath, scan through it again. Best way. Very important point, flag all uncertain points for a project manager's, quality team, editor's, client. Okay, flag them, don't try to conceal them. That's the most helpful thing for us all. Flag quoted material. Either way, are we sourcing existing translations? That needs to be marked, or directly back translated. That needs to be flagged. And finally, special attention must be paid to keywords, footnotes, and references, all of which are full of potential pitfalls. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, for sharing such useful information. We hope our attendees have certainly gained a lot of critical information from this session. We are now open to taking questions. We request all the attendees to kindly send us their queries using the questions tab in the control panel alongside.
Do we have one question in here?
Yes, please, John, go ahead.
Hang on, I'm not seeing it. Would you mind reading it? Sorry.
Yeah. Which one are you referring to? We've got a handful.
Okay, hang on. Just trying to see.
Okay. Can you please tell us some English translation examples?
For the points I was discussing earlier in the webinar. Yeah, sure. If that's what your intended question is, we were thinking about or mentioning rather your terminology that is inconsistent and dated. So, for example, you might be looking at, as I was, a study, well, an abstract on nursing studies, where the student nurses at the beginning of the abstract are being asked to make entries in a thing called a student diary, and at the end of the abstract they're filling out a thing called a student journal, and so that's in the source text. So as a translator, I will want to know, is a student journal, a student diary, are they the same document? Are they something different? If they're different, what is the difference? And so I will be flagging that probably for the client in this case, because it's coming from the source. Dated terminology, it's just an example that struck me recently was that academic Japanese quite commonly and quite casually uses the phrase toyo no, and this comes out in English as the Orient or Oriental. And I can imagine that Oriental might work in the context of talking about, Oriental medicine, the traditional medicines of Japan, Korea, China. But once you bring it over into the humanities, the term Oriental is highly controversial. It's got very negative connotations ever since, Edward Said in the early 80s talking about Orientalism as a the West viewing other cultures as other and in a manipulative way, indeed. So that kind of terminology, may be problematic going from one language to another, though it doesn't, cause an issue within the source language. Thanks.
Yes. Hi, John. There is another query directed to you.
Yeah.
That's if the source paper is written badly, to what degree should the translator adjust the translation? We are, I think, free to do a little bit of paraphrasing to make something smoother. But if there are serious questions about what does the author mean, what are they really trying to say here? I just can't understand what they're trying to say. Well, that definitely should be flagged. It should be marked. It should be brought to the attention of people going up the checking chain, editing chain, and finally, if necessary, to the client. So we should be, I think, quite activist, quite ready to flag issues that are in the original. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, let's see. So I'm getting I don't know why, but my question box is really, really narrow. So sorry, Uttkarsha, if you can
no problem.
Select anything. Thanks.
Yes, definitely. Okay, there is another question, that is, scientific issues have many things in common. In writing, stage methods and discussion have similarities with other papers, and this make plagiarism problem. How to solve this while translating?
Yeah, I'm not sure that this is a translation issue as such. I think it's more of closer to an editing issue. Would you agree, Uttkarsha? But certainly in the case of any, quoted material appearing in a paper, that needs to be flagged. I mentioned we often have issues of for example, Japanese papers quoting other language material as translated in Japanese. What are we to do with this? It certainly needs to be flagged. Uttkarsha, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree to that. The plagiarism check needs to be done at the source text itself, and while the author is writing the article himself or herself. There's another question that has brought my attention is, if some question cannot be asked in a specific culture, could that be left out if you are translating a questionnaire?
I would have to see the particular context and the particular text too, but generally speaking, a questionnaire, the ones that come to my mind tend to be things like psychological questionnaires, etc., etc. You're translating perhaps quite often from English into another language, actually, in this case. I think that if you have an issue like that, that is a good example of something that you flag to the client, because if the client isn't aware of this issue, then it's something they should be aware of. And I don't think it's our job as translators to make up for any lack of understanding that they have, of contextual awareness, shall we say, that they have. But it certainly is our job as translators, and going down the line, to let the client know that there's an issue there.
Absolutely. So we take the last question for today as we have it. There's Laura asking if companies that take up translation assignments are aware of the time constraints that translators face, and they do not really have time to study in depth the source text. So are companies aware and work on that aspect with their clients?
In my experience as a freelancer working for myself in the past, very commonly no. Very commonly companies will come to you in a panic going, we need this, yesterday. And with Ulatus, we have a much well-developed structure through project management, through client services, where a project will come to us, flagged as normal or express or super express, and so that's taken into consideration on the project management end. But for you as a translator, when you accept a project, you're taking responsibility for that project, and if you feel that this isn't exactly your area, and that you won't really have time to read around it as much as you should, then that's one of the red flags I talked about in, am I suitable for this project? And that would be a kind of a red flag for you to decline the project. It doesn't, it doesn't impact you negatively if you turn a project down. It shows us that you're exercising discretion, in fact, as a translator, So there are times when you might feel this one's not for me, even though as a freelancer you want the job, of course, but not this time around. Yeah, thanks.
Agree. So that's all the questions that we had. So we would once again like to thank all the attendees for joining the webinar. Please find the exclusive code to get a discount on our translation services in the chat box. We would also request you all to please fill the feedback survey displayed after you leave the webinar. Your participation will allow us to evaluate the effectiveness of our webinar. Have a good day.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.